2 weeks after their wedding, Ada carried a small bag of warm takeaway meals. As she hurried toward the front door of the house she now shared with her husband, Chike. The evening air felt soft and hopeful. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and kindly hit the like button. It truly means a lot to us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's dive into this unforgettable story. Ada had spent the entire afternoon smiling to herself at work, imagining how surprised Chike would be when she walked in with his favorite peppered chicken and jollof rice. Marriage still felt new and magical to her. Just 14 days earlier, she had stood before family and friends in a white gown, promising forever to the man she believed was her soulmate. She quietly unlocked the front door and stepped inside, careful not to make noise. The living room lights were dim, and the house smelled faintly of Chike's cologne. Ada smiled warmly. "Perfect," she whispered to herself. "He's home." She placed the food on the dining table and slipped off her shoes so she could sneak up on him. The plan was simple: walk into the bedroom, shout surprise, and watch him laugh like he always did when she did something playful. But just as she began walking down the hallway, something stopped her. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Ada froze instantly. At first she thought it must be the television. But then she heard Chike's voice, soft, playful, intimate in a way she had only ever heard when they were alone together. Her heart began to pound. Maybe he's on a call, she murmured nervously. But then she heard the woman speak again. The voice sounded familiar, uncomfortably familiar. Ada slowly walked closer to the bedroom door. The closer she got, the clearer the voices became. The laughter turned into whispers, and the whispers carried a tone Ada instantly recognized. It was the tone of lovers. Her chest tightened. No, that's impossible," she whispered. With trembling fingers, Ada gently pushed the bedroom door open just a little. The world stopped. On the bed, her bed, lay Chike. And beside him was Amara, her half-sister. The two of them were tangled together beneath the sheets, laughing softly like people who had nothing in the world to hide. Ada felt as if the air had been ripped out of her lungs. The bag of food slipped from her hands and fell silently onto the carpet. For a moment, neither Chike nor Amara noticed her. They were too wrapped up in each other. Then Chike looked up. Their eyes met. Shock flashed across his face, but it disappeared almost instantly. Amara slowly turned her head toward the door. Instead of panic, she smirked. Ada's heart shattered in a way she didn't even know was possible. Her husband, her sister, 2 weeks after her wedding. Thousands of questions rushed through her mind all at once. How long had this been happening? Was their marriage a lie? Had her own sister been betraying her even before the wedding? Yet strangely, Ada did not scream. She did not cry. She simply stood there, staring at them with eyes that felt empty and numb. Then, without saying a single word, she stepped backward and gently closed the door. The hallway felt colder now. Each step toward the front door felt heavier than the last. Outside, the night wind brushed against her face, but Ada barely felt it. Behind that door was the life she thought she had just begun. But somehow, only 14 days later, it had already collapsed. And the most painful truth of all had just revealed itself. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you trust the most. The bedroom door closed softly behind Ada, yet the sound echoed inside her chest like a thunderclap. She stepped out of the house without looking back, her legs moving automatically while her mind struggled to understand what she had just seen. Outside, the night air felt colder than usual. The street was quiet, almost peaceful, which made the chaos inside her heart feel even louder. Ada walked slowly toward her car, her hands trembling as she searched for her keys inside her purse. Inside the house, Chike had already jumped out of bed. "Did you see that?" he whispered sharply, panic rising in his voice. Amara stretched lazily against the pillows, completely unbothered. "Of course she saw," she replied calmly. Chike began pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. "This is bad. This is really bad." Amara sat up slowly, wrapping the bedsheet around herself as though nothing unusual had happened. "Relax," she said with a faint smile. "What's the worst she can do? Cry." Back outside, Ada sat inside her car but didn't start the engine. Her hands rested on the steering wheel while her mind replayed the moment over and over again. Chike's face. Amara's smirk. The image refused to leave her head. Just 2 weeks ago, that same bedroom had been filled with laughter, flowers, and wedding gifts from family and friends who had come to celebrate their new life together. Now it felt like a stage where the cruelest betrayal had just been performed. Ada leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes. Her chest tightened as memories flooded in. The wedding day. Her father proudly walking her down the aisle. Her mother wiping tears of joy. Chike holding her hands and promising to love her forever. But another memory suddenly surfaced. Amara. Her sister had been everywhere during the wedding preparations, helping choose the decorations, helping arrange the guest list, even helping Chike pick his suit. At the time, Ada had felt grateful for the support. Now the memory made her stomach twist. Inside the house, Chike rushed toward the window and looked outside. Her car is still there, he muttered nervously. Amara walked toward him slowly. So, she asked. So, Amara, this is my wife. Chike snapped. Amara laughed quietly. You didn't seem worried about that 5 minutes ago. Chike turned away, guilt beginning to creep across his face. Back in the car, Ada finally started the engine. But instead of driving away, she simply let the car idle. Her thoughts felt heavy and tangled. One question kept returning to her mind. How long? How long had this been happening behind her back? The way Amara had smirked. The way Chike had barely looked ashamed. It didn't feel like something new. It felt practiced, planned. And that realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. Ada gripped the steering wheel tighter. A deep, quiet pain spread through her chest, but strangely, the tears still refused to come. She expected rage. She expected screaming. Instead, what she felt was something far heavier. Silence. Inside the house, Amara checked her phone casually. She'll come back, she said. Chike looked at her in disbelief. How can you be so calm? Amara shrugged. Because secrets like this don't start overnight. Chike froze. Back in the car, Ada stared at the dark road ahead of her. The house behind her was supposed to be the beginning of her new life. But something inside her told her the truth was much worse than what she had already seen. And somewhere deep in her heart, another terrifying thought slowly began to form. What if the betrayal had started long before the wedding? Morning arrived slowly, but Ada had not slept. She had spent the entire night sitting in her car by the roadside, watching darkness fade into pale sunlight. Her mind replayed the same horrifying image over and over again, Chike and Amara in her bed. By dawn, the numbness in her chest had hardened into something else. Determination. Ada started the car and drove back toward the house. The same house that had once felt warm and welcoming now felt like unfamiliar territory. As she parked outside, her hands rested briefly on the steering wheel. Today, I will hear the truth, she whispered to herself. Inside the house, Chike sat nervously on the couch, staring at his phone without really seeing it. He had barely slept either. Every sound from outside made his heart jump. When he finally heard the front door open, his stomach dropped. Ada walked in quietly. Her face was calm. Too calm. Chike stood up immediately. Ada. Listen, I can explain. Don't, she said softly. Her voice was steady, but it carried a sharpness that made him stop instantly. Amara appeared from the hallway a moment later, wearing one of Ada's robes like she belonged there. The sight nearly shattered Ada's composure, but she forced herself to remain still. So, Ada said slowly, looking between the two of them. Let's talk. The room fell into heavy silence. Chike cleared his throat nervously. Last night wasn't what it looked like. Ada's eyes narrowed slightly. That sentence, she replied quietly, is the worst lie anyone can ever say. Amara folded her arms and leaned against the wall. You already saw everything, she said casually. Why pretend otherwise? Chike shot her an angry look. Amara, be quiet. Ada turned her gaze toward her sister. Actually, I want her to speak, she said. Amara smirked faintly, clearly enjoying the tension in the room. You want the truth? She asked. Yes, Ada replied firmly. Chike suddenly stepped forward. Ada, please, how long? Ada asked sharply. The question hung in the air. Neither of them answered. Ada's voice grew firmer. How long has this been happening? Chike looked down at the floor. Amara answered first. Months. Ada blinked slowly. The word echoed painfully inside her chest. Months, she repeated quietly. Chike rubbed his face with both hands. It started before the wedding, he admitted. Ada felt something inside her crack. Before the wedding. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. So while I was planning our future, she said slowly, you were sleeping with my sister? Chike tried to step closer to her. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said desperately. Ada raised a hand to stop him. Don't come closer. Amara tilted her head slightly. You want the real truth? She asked again. Ada looked at her coldly. Yes. Amara shrugged. Chike didn't even want to marry you. The words hit the room like a sudden explosion. Chike's head snapped toward her. Amara. But the damage had already been done. Ada's face slowly turned pale. What did you say? She asked quietly. Amara spoke without hesitation. He married you because your family pushed him to. Chike shook his head quickly. That's not. But Ada was already stepping backward. Every word felt like another knife twisting deeper into her heart. The marriage. The wedding. The vows. Were they all lies? Her voice dropped to a whisper. So, the entire marriage was just pressure. Chike's silence answered her question louder than any words could. Ada stared at both of them, her heart breaking piece by piece. In that moment, she realized something terrifying. The betrayal she had witnessed last night might not even be the worst part of the story, because the deeper truth was beginning to surface. And it was far uglier than she ever imagined. The room fell into a suffocating silence after Amara's words. Ada felt as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly become unstable. Her husband stared at the floor, while her sister stood confidently beside the wall. Ada's chest rose slowly as she tried to control her breathing. Chike, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly, leave the room. Chike looked up in surprise. Ada, listen. I said leave, she repeated, her tone sharper this time. For a moment he hesitated, glancing nervously between the two sisters. But the cold determination in Ada's eyes left no space for argument. Slowly, he walked toward the door. As he passed Amara, she gave him a small, amused smile. Chike avoided her eyes and stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Now the room held only the two sisters. Ada and Amara stood several feet apart, yet the distance between them felt far greater than that. For years, they had shared family dinners, childhood memories, and quiet conversations about dreams and life. Now those memories felt poisoned. Ada folded her arms tightly across her chest. Start talking, she said. Amara sighed as if the entire situation bored her. You really want to do this? She asked. Yes. Amara walked slowly toward the window and pulled the curtain aside, letting sunlight spill into the room. You always had everything, she said calmly. Ada frowned. What are you talking about? Amara turned around, her expression suddenly colder. Don't pretend you don't know. Ada's confusion deepened. Know what? Amara laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You were always the favorite, she said. Ada stared at her. That's ridiculous. Is it? Amara replied. She began pacing slowly across the room. Better schools. More attention. More praise. Even when we were children, everyone always talked about Ada this, Ada that. Ada shook her head. That's not true. But Amara continued speaking as if she hadn't heard her. You were the beautiful one. The successful one. The one our parents were proud of. Her voice carried years of bitterness. And what was I? Ada felt a deep knot form in her stomach. Amara. We were just kids. Amara stopped pacing. Exactly, she said quietly. She looked directly into Ada's eyes. And even then, I was invisible. The pain in her voice lingered for a moment before her expression hardened again. But then I met Chike. Ada's heart tightened. What about him? Amara tilted her head slightly. He noticed me first. Ada blinked. What? Yes, Amara said calmly. Before he even knew you existed. The words stunned Ada into silence. Amara continued speaking. We met at a party 2 years ago. We talked for hours that night. Ada struggled to process the information. But you introduced him to me. Amara nodded slowly. Exactly. Ada's voice rose in disbelief. You brought him into my life. Amara's lips curled into a faint smile. Yes. Why? Ada demanded. Amara stepped closer, her voice dropping into a chilling whisper. Because I wanted to see if he would choose you. Ada's breath caught in her throat. And did he? She asked quietly. Amara shrugged. He married you, didn't he? The room felt suddenly smaller. Ada's heart pounded as another disturbing realization formed. Wait, are you saying you planned all this? Amara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked past Ada toward the door. Before leaving, she paused and glanced back. I just wanted to prove something, she said softly. Ada's voice trembled. Prove what? Amara's smile returned, slow, cold, and unsettling. That no matter what you have, I can always take it away. Then she opened the door and walked out. Ada stood frozen in the center of the room, her heart sinking deeper with every second. Because the betrayal she thought was about love was actually about something far darker, jealousy, and the terrifying truth was beginning to emerge. This wasn't just an affair. It was revenge. Ada remained standing in the bedroom long after Amara walked out. The silence around her felt thick and suffocating. Every word her sister had spoken replayed inside her mind like a cruel echo. I just wanted to prove something. The sentence chilled her to the core. Ada slowly walked toward the bed and stared at the crumpled sheets. Just hours ago, this place had revealed the ugliest truth of her life. Now it simply looked like a battlefield after the damage had been done. Her hands trembled slightly. No, she whispered to herself. There has to be more to this. She needed answers. Real answers. Ada left the bedroom and walked down the hallway. Chaik was sitting in the living room with his elbows resting on his knees, his face buried in his hands. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. Ada. But before he could say anything else, she walked past him without a word and picked up his phone from a table. Chaik stood up immediately. What are you doing? Ada's voice remained calm. I'm looking for the truth. Chaik's eyes widened. You can't just go through my phone. Ada slowly turned toward him. Really? She said quietly. After everything I saw last night? Chaik froze. Ada unlocked the phone easily. She had known his password since the beginning of their relationship. Her fingers began scrolling through messages. At first there was nothing unusual. Work chats, friends, family conversations. Then she found it. Amara's name. Her heart pounded as she opened the message thread. Hundreds of messages appeared. Her hands trembled as she began reading. Chaik shifted nervously nearby. Ada, please. But Ada raised a hand without looking up. Be quiet. The messages stretched back months. No, years. Her breath caught. 2 years. 2 entire years of secret conversations, hidden jokes, and intimate messages filled the screen. Her eyes blurred as she read one message from Amara. She has no idea we're still meeting. Ada's chest tightened. Another message appeared. The wedding is getting closer. Are you sure about this? Then Chaik's reply. Relax. Once everything settles, I'll figure it out. Ada's stomach dropped. The wedding. They had been talking about the wedding like it was just another obstacle. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You were together this entire time. Chaik ran his hands through his hair. It's not what you think. Ada laughed bitterly. That sentence again. She continued scrolling. Another message from Amara appeared. Maybe you should just marry her. That way you'll always stay close. Ada felt the world tilt. She looked up slowly at Chaik. Did you see this message? Chaik's face turned pale. Ada read the message again, louder this time. Maybe you should just marry her. Her voice trembled. So the wedding was actually her idea. Chaik said nothing, and his silence was the answer. Ada felt something inside her chest collapse. All those months of planning, the dress, the decorations, the vows, they had meant everything to her. But to them, It had been part of a twisted arrangement. Ada lowered the phone slowly. "I was never the wife," she said quietly. Chike stepped toward her. "Ada, listen." "No," she interrupted sharply. Her eyes were filled with hurt now. "I was the bridge." Chike froze. Ada continued softly. "The bridge that allowed you to stay close to my sister." The room fell silent. The truth had finally surfaced. This betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't even just an affair. It had been carefully maintained for years. And the cruelest realization of all was now impossible to ignore. Ada hadn't unknowingly destroyed their relationship. She had simply been placed in the middle of it. The tension inside the house had become unbearable. Ada stood in the living room, gripping Chike's phone tightly in her hand while the painful truth echoed in her mind. 2 years of lies. 2 years of betrayal hidden behind smiles and family gatherings. She looked at Chike one last time. "This doesn't end here," she said quietly. Before he could respond, Ada picked up her own phone and dialed a number she never imagined calling for something like this. Her father. Chike's face turned pale. "Ada, don't do this," he pleaded. But Ada ignored him. The phone rang twice before her father answered. "Ada? My daughter, how are you?" For a moment, Ada couldn't speak. Hearing his warm voice made the pain in her chest feel even heavier. "Daddy, I need you and Mom to come over," she said softly. Her father's voice immediately filled with concern. "Is everything okay?" Ada looked toward the hallway where Amara had disappeared earlier. "No," she replied quietly. "Everything is not okay." Within an hour, the house that had once hosted joyful wedding celebrations now felt like a courtroom waiting for judgment. Ada sat silently on the couch while Chike paced around the room like a nervous prisoner. Soon, the front door opened. Ada's parents stepped inside. Her mother's face carried confusion. "Ada, what's going on?" Her father looked around the room carefully. "Where's Chike?" he asked. Chike slowly stepped forward from the corner of the room. "I'm here, sir." The tension immediately thickened. Ada's father studied his face. "You look like someone who has done something wrong," he said calmly. Before anyone could speak again, another voice came from a hallway. Amara walked into the living room. Her mother gasped in surprise. "Amara? What are you doing here?" Ada stood up slowly. Her voice was steady, but every word carried deep pain. "Tell them," she said. The room fell silent. Chike swallowed nervously. "Ada, please." But Ada didn't look at him. She looked directly at her sister. "Tell them what you've been doing with my husband." Her mother's eyes widened. "What?" Ada's father frowned deeply. "Someone explain what is happening right now." No one spoke. Finally, Ada stepped forward. 2 weeks after my wedding," she said slowly. "I came home last night and found Chike in bed with Amara." Her mother covered her mouth in shock. Her father's face darkened instantly. "That is impossible," he said. Ada shook her head. "I wish it was." The room filled with a painful silence. Then suddenly, her father's hand slammed onto the table. "Chike," he thundered. Chike flinched. "Is this true?" Chike opened his mouth, but no words came out. That silence was enough. Ada's mother began crying. "My daughters, how could this happen between you two?" Amara remained standing calmly. Her father turned toward her. "And you," he said angrily. "What kind of sister does something like this?" For the first time, Amara's confident expression faltered slightly. But then she lifted her chin. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. Everyone turned toward her. Ada felt a strange knot tighten in her stomach. "What now?" Ada asked. Amara placed a hand on her stomach. Her voice was steady. "I'm pregnant." The words froze the entire room. Her mother's crying stopped instantly. Her father stared at her in disbelief. Chike looked like the air had been knocked out of him. Ada felt her heart drop deeper than it already had. Her voice came out slowly. "You're..." "What?" Amara repeated calmly. "I'm pregnant." The room remained frozen in stunned silence. Ada's father slowly turned toward Chike. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Is the child yours?" Chike's lips trembled, but no answer came. And in that heavy moment, one terrifying question hung in the air. If the betrayal had already destroyed their family, What would this pregnancy do next? The words, "I'm pregnant," continued to echo through the living room, like a heavy storm that refused to pass. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Ada's mother slowly lowered herself into a chair, her hands trembling. This cannot be happening," she whispered. Ada stood frozen where she was, staring at her sister as if trying to understand whether the moment was real or some terrible dream. Her father's eyes slowly turned toward Chike. The anger in his voice was controlled, but it was clear it was barely being contained. "Answer the question," he said. Chike swallowed nervously. "What question, sir?" Her father stepped closer. "Is the child yours?" The room seemed to shrink around them. Chike rubbed the back of his neck, his breathing uneven. I don't know," he admitted. The answer exploded like a bomb. Ada's mother gasped. "You don't know," she cried. Ada's father clenched his fists. "How could you not know?" Chike began speaking quickly, panic filling his voice. "Because this is not what it looks like." Amara laughed quietly. That laugh immediately drew everyone's attention. "Oh, please," she said calmly. "Now you want to act innocent." Chike turned toward her angrily. "You're the one who started this." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "You came after me," Chike continued defensively. "You were the one texting me constantly. You were the one showing up everywhere." Amara's eyes hardened. "And you had no control over yourself?" she asked coldly. Chike threw his hands into the air. "You manipulated everything." Ada watched the argument unfold, her heart sinking deeper with every second. The two people who had destroyed her marriage were now turning against each other like enemies. Amara stepped closer to Chike. "Manipulated?" she repeated. Her voice carried quiet fury. "You were the one promising me things." Chike looked stunned. "What promises?" Amara's eyes narrowed. "Should I remind you?" She pulled out her phone and waved it slightly. "Or should I read your messages out loud?" Chike's face immediately drained of color. "Don't do that," he warned. Amara ignored him. "You said you would divorce Ada after the wedding," she said clearly. The room froze again. Ada felt her chest tighten. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "What did she just say?" Chike shook his head quickly. "That's not what I meant." But Amara continued speaking. "You told me the marriage was temporary," she said. Chike stepped forward angrily. "You're twisting my words." Amara's laugh returned, but this time it sounded colder. "No, Chike," she said. "I'm repeating them exactly." She turned toward Ada. "Ask him," she said calmly. "Ask him what he promised me." Ada looked slowly toward her husband. The man she had trusted with her entire future now looked like a stranger. "Did you promise to leave me?" she asked quietly. Chike hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Ada closed her eyes for a moment as the weight of the truth settled over her. Her marriage had not just been betrayed. It had been planned to fail. Her father suddenly spoke again, his voice full of disappointment. "You have destroyed this family," he said. But this time it wasn't clear who he was speaking to. Chike, or Amara, or both of them. Because the ugly truth had finally revealed itself. The affair that had begun in secrecy was now collapsing in public. And when betrayal turns against itself, the fall is always brutal. But the worst part of the story still hadn't arrived. Because the question of the child's true father remained unanswered. The argument in the living room had drained everyone. The shouting had faded, but the tension still hung in the air like smoke after fire. Ada stood near the window, staring outside, while the others remained scattered around the room in uneasy silence. For the first time since everything had begun, Chike looked completely broken. His shoulders sagged, and the confidence he once carried had vanished. "Ada," he said softly. She didn't turn around. "Please talk to me." Ada kept her eyes fixed on the quiet street outside. "What is left to say?" she asked calmly. Chike stepped closer, his voice shaking. "I made a mistake." Ada let out a slow breath. "A mistake," she repeated. Now she turned to face him. "You call 2 years of lies a mistake?" Chike's eyes filled with regret. "I wasn't thinking clearly." Amara rolled her eyes from across the room. "Oh, please," she muttered. Chike ignored her and continued speaking to Ada. "She seduced me," he said quickly. She kept pushing herself into my life. Amara burst into laughter. The sound echoed sharply through the room. Listen to him, she said sarcastically. Now I'm the villain. Chike's patience snapped. You are, he shouted. You kept coming back. Amara folded her arms. And you kept opening the door. The argument threatened to start again, but Ada suddenly raised her hand. Enough. Her voice was quiet, yet powerful enough to silence both of them instantly. Ada looked at Chike with eyes filled with exhaustion rather than anger. You're blaming her now, she said slowly. Chike swallowed. She pushed me into it. Ada shook her head. No one pushes a person into betrayal. The words landed heavily in the room. For a moment, Chike couldn't respond. Then something inside him finally cracked. His voice softened. I regret everything, he whispered. Ada studied his face carefully. Tears were beginning to form in his eyes. I regret the lies, he continued. I regret the affair. I regret hurting you. Amara scoffed quietly. Now you feel regret? Chike ignored her again. Ada, please, he begged. I know I destroyed our marriage, but we can still fix things. Ada's expression didn't change. Fix what? She asked. Our relationship, Chike said desperately. Ada stared at him as though trying to recognize the man standing before her. You destroyed trust, she said quietly. Chike lowered his head. I know. And trust, Ada continued, is the only thing that keeps a marriage alive. The room fell silent again. Then Ada looked slowly toward Amara. There's still one truth we don't know, she said. Everyone understood what she meant. The baby. Chike's head lifted. Ada spoke calmly. We need a DNA test. The suggestion sent a ripple through the room. Amara's confident expression flickered slightly. Chike looked nervous. A test, he repeated. Yes, Ada replied firmly. If you're telling the truth. You shouldn't be afraid. Chike hesitated. His silence lasted longer than it should have. Ada noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why are you scared? She asked. Chike quickly shook his head. I'm not scared. But the tension in his voice betrayed him. Amara watched him closely now. A faint suspicion began to appear on her face. Ada crossed her arms. The test will reveal the truth, she said. No one spoke. Because suddenly, the situation had changed. The betrayal had already shattered their lives. But the DNA test threatened to uncover something even worse. And deep inside the room, an uncomfortable question began to grow. What if the baby didn't belong to Chike at all? 3 days later, the tension in the house had grown heavier than anyone imagined possible. No one laughed. No one spoke freely. Every conversation ended in silence. The DNA test result had finally arrived. Ada sat quietly at the dining table, staring at the sealed envelope in front of her. The thin piece of paper inside it carried the power to destroy what little remained of the family. Across the room, Chike paced nervously like a man awaiting judgment. Amara sat on the couch with her arms folded, trying to appear confident, though the tightness in her face betrayed her. Ada's parents stood nearby, their expressions filled with exhaustion. 3 days had felt like 3 years. Finally, Ada placed her hand on the envelope. Her father spoke gently. Are you sure you want to open it now? Ada nodded slowly. Yes. Her voice sounded calm, but her heart pounded inside her chest. Chike stopped pacing. Maybe we should wait, he suggested. Ada looked at him. You weren't patient when you were betraying me, she said quietly. The room fell silent again. Ada carefully tore open the envelope. The sound of paper ripping seemed louder than it should have been. She pulled out the test result and began reading. Her eyes moved slowly across the page. For a moment, no one could read her expression. Then something changed. Her eyebrows tightened slightly. Chike noticed immediately. What does it say? He asked nervously. Ada didn't answer. She read the paper again to make sure she hadn't misunderstood. Amara leaned forward impatiently. Well, she demanded. Ada slowly lowered the paper. Her voice came out calm but firm. The baby is not Chike's. The room froze. For several seconds, no one reacted. Chike blinked in confusion. What? Amara's confident posture collapsed instantly. That's impossible, she said quickly. Ada handed the paper to her father. He adjusted his glasses and read the result himself. Then he looked up. "It's correct," he said quietly. Chaik stepped forward. "Let me see that." He grabbed the paper and scanned the result. His face went pale. I don't understand," he murmured. Amara shook her head repeatedly. "No, this test must be wrong." Ada folded her arms. "It's from a certified laboratory," she said. Amara's breathing became faster. "This doesn't make sense." Her mother stared at her. "Amara," she asked slowly, "is there something you're not telling us?" Amara didn't answer. Chaik's eyes suddenly narrowed. "Wait," he said. He turned toward her. "Is there someone else?" Amara looked away. The silence spoke louder than any confession. Ada felt a strange mixture of pain and disbelief. "So there was another man," she said quietly. Amara snapped back defensively. "It's none of your business." Chaik laughed bitterly. "None of our business?" he said. "You dragged me into this." Amara's voice rose. "You are already cheating with me." Their argument exploded again, but this time something had changed. The illusion that their relationship had been special was gone. It had been nothing more than a chain of lies. Ada watched them quietly, her heart strangely calmer now. The betrayal still hurt, but the truth had shifted something inside her. Amara wasn't just someone who had destroyed her marriage. She was someone who had been lying to everyone. Her father spoke again, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You have brought shame to this family." Amara said nothing, because the truth had finally trapped her. The affair that had caused so much destruction had now collapsed under its own weight. But one question still remained unanswered. If the baby wasn't Chaik's, then who was the real father? The room felt colder after the DNA result was revealed. The silence that followed was no longer just tension. It was the heavy weight of truth finally settling over everyone. Amara sat frozen on the couch, staring at the floor. For the first time since everything began, she had no words. Across the room, Chaik still held the DNA report in his hand, reading the same line over and over again as if the words might suddenly change. "The alleged father is excluded." His chest tightened. All the chaos, the betrayal, the fights. And the child wasn't even his. Chaik slowly lowered the paper. "So all of this," he said quietly, "was for nothing." Amara looked up sharply. "For nothing?" she snapped. Chaik laughed bitterly. "You destroyed my marriage." Amara stood up immediately. "You helped destroy it," she fired back. Their voices began rising again, but Ada no longer reacted. She simply stood there, watching them. Something inside her had changed. The shock, the anger, the heartbreak, it had all burned through her like a wildfire. What remained now was something quieter. Clarity. Her father broke the silence. "This has gone far enough," he said firmly. Everyone looked toward him. He turned to Ada. "My daughter," he said gently, "what do you want to do now?" The question hung heavily in the air. For a moment, Ada didn't answer. She looked around the room slowly. At her crying mother. At her ashamed father. At the sister who had betrayed her. And at the husband who had broken his vows. Then she spoke. "I'm filing for divorce." The words landed like a final verdict. Chaik's head snapped up. "Ada, wait." She raised her hand. "No." Her voice was calm but unshakable. "You already made your choice long before today." Chaik stepped toward her desperately. "I was wrong," he said quickly. "I admit it. I made terrible decisions." Ada looked at him with quiet sadness. "You didn't make one decision," she replied. "You made hundreds. Each lie, each message, each moment he chose to betray her." Chaik's shoulders collapsed. "Ada, please," he whispered. But Ada had already turned away. The marriage she once fought so hard to protect no longer existed. Her father nodded slowly. "You are making the right decision," he said. Amara suddenly spoke from across the room. "So that's it?" she asked. Everyone looked at her. She laughed bitterly. "You're all blaming me like I did this alone." Her mother shook her head in disappointment. "You betrayed your own sister," she said. Amara's face hardened again. "And he betrayed his wife," she shot back, pointing at Chaik. No one argued. Because she wasn't wrong. Chaik had destroyed his own life. Within days, the story began spreading among friends and relatives. Whispers filled family gatherings. Phone calls stopped coming. The respect Chaik once enjoyed in his community slowly disappeared. At work, people began looking at him differently. The reputation he had built for years crumbled faster than he expected. Amara didn't escape consequences either. The shame of the scandal followed her everywhere. And eventually, she disappeared from the family home altogether. But for Ada, the most painful part wasn't the gossip. It wasn't the embarrassment. It was the realization that the people she trusted most had broken her heart without hesitation. Yet deep inside, she knew something important. Some endings are painful, but sometimes they are necessary, because the consequences of betrayal always arrive. And when they do, they rarely come alone. 6 months passed. Time moved forward, but the scars left behind by the betrayal had not completely faded. The once joyful home Ada had shared with Chaik was now nothing more than a memory she rarely allowed herself to revisit. Her life had changed in ways she never expected. The divorce had been finalized quietly, without arguments or drama. Ada had chosen peace over prolonged pain. She moved into a small apartment across town and began rebuilding her life one day at a time. Work became her refuge. Friends who truly cared about her stayed close. Slowly, the broken pieces of her heart began forming something stronger. Meanwhile, Chaik's life had taken a very different direction. The confident man people once respected had become a shadow of himself. His reputation at work had suffered badly after the scandal spread. Colleagues whispered behind his back. Some clients quietly stopped doing business with him. Trust, once lost, proved difficult to rebuild. One evening, Chaik sat alone in his dim apartment, staring at an old photograph on his phone. It was a picture from his wedding day. Ada stood beside him in her white dress, smiling brightly, her eyes filled with love and hope for the future. Chaik's chest tightened. He zoomed into her face. The happiness in her eyes felt almost painful to look at now. "How did I ruin something so beautiful?" he whispered to himself. Regret had become his constant companion. Every quiet moment reminded him of the choices he had made. Every lonely evening reminded him of what he had lost. He set the phone down and buried his face in his hands. "I was a fool," he murmured. Across town, Ada walked slowly through a quiet park after work. The cool evening breeze brushed against her face as she watched people passing by. Children laughed near a fountain. Couples walked hand in hand. For a moment, a faint sadness passed through her heart. But it was no longer the overwhelming pain she once felt. It was simply a reminder of the chapter she had survived. Her phone buzzed. She looked down and saw an unfamiliar message notification. Her curiosity made her open it. The message was long, very long. As she began reading, she quickly recognized the sender. Chaik. He had written an apology. Line after line, he poured out his regret. "I know I destroyed our marriage. I know I broke your trust. I know I hurt you in ways that words cannot repair." Ada continued reading silently. "If I could go back in time, I would choose differently. I would protect what we had instead of throwing it away. You deserved loyalty, honesty, and love. And I failed to give you those things." The message ended with one final sentence. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know how deeply sorry I am." Ada lowered her phone slowly. The park around her remained peaceful. But inside her heart, something complicated stirred. Not anger, not hatred, something quieter. Reflection. She understood something now that she hadn't understood months ago. Some apologies come too late. Some damage cannot be undone. But regret has a strange power. It forces people to see the truth they once ignored. Ada slipped her phone back into her bag and continued walking. Chaik's apology did not erase the past, and it didn't change the future she was building. But it confirmed one thing clearly. The man who once betrayed her now fully understood the cost of his choices. And sometimes, that realization is the heaviest punishment of all. 2 years later, Ada stood in front of a quiet audience inside a small community hall. The room was filled with women and men who had come to attend a seminar about healing after betrayal and emotional trauma. Ada had never imagined that her painful experience would one day become a story people wanted to hear. Yet life had a strange way of turning wounds into wisdom. She adjusted the microphone gently and looked across the room. Faces of different ages stared back at her, some curious, some hopeful, and some carrying silent pain she recognized all too well. Ada took a slow breath before speaking. 2 years ago, she began softly, I thought my life had completely ended. The audience listened closely. I had just discovered that my husband was having an affair with my own sister, and the discovery happened only 2 weeks after my wedding. A quiet murmur spread across the room. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others simply watched her with deep sympathy. Ada continued calmly. At that moment, I believed the betrayal would destroy me. She paused briefly. The pain felt unbearable. The shame felt overwhelming. And the questions inside my mind felt endless. She remembered those nights clearly. The sleepless hours, the confusion, the heartbreak. But something important happened after the storm, she said. The room grew quieter. I realized that betrayal does not define the person who was hurt. Her voice became stronger now. It reveals the character of the person who committed it. A few people nodded slowly. Ada continued speaking. My ex-husband eventually understood the damage he caused. My sister disappeared from our family for a long time after the truth came out. She paused again. Both of them had to live with the consequences of their choices. The audience remained silent. Ada's expression softened. But the most important lesson wasn't about them, she said. It was about me. She stepped slightly closer to the microphone. I learned that losing the wrong people is sometimes the beginning of finding yourself. A gentle ripple of agreement moved through the room. Ada smiled faintly. At first, I believed forgiveness meant letting those people back into my life. She shook her head. But I discovered something deeper. Forgiveness isn't about restoring broken relationships. It's about freeing your own heart from the prison of bitterness. Several people in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. Ada's voice softened again. The truth is, some betrayals leave scars that never completely disappear. She placed a hand lightly over her heart. But those scars become reminders of our strength. She looked across the audience one final time. If you have been betrayed, abandoned, or deeply hurt by someone you trusted, she paused. Remember this. Your value was never determined by the way someone else treated you. The room remained completely still. Ada smiled gently. Sometimes the most painful endings are actually the beginning of a stronger life. She stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, the room stayed silent. Then applause slowly filled the hall. Not loud. Not dramatic, but deeply sincere. And somewhere far away, in another part of the city, a man named Chike occasionally thought about the life he had once thrown away. Because some lessons are learned too late, and the cost of betrayal is something time never fully erases. But Ada had learned the most important truth of all. She survived, and sometimes, survival itself is the greatest victory.